Erev Tov, everyone, and apologies for blasting your ears with that. I keep forgetting that when I do a new lead-in, I actually have to readjust the sound. We got it now, though. It's something. It is Tuesday night. That's what it is. It's Tuesday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset, therefore it must be the Rabbis Discuss, whatever it is that the rabbis want to discuss. So while we're, let's see who we got in the chat room. We have Donald and we have Marshall so far. And we have a few watching in the background. And without further ado, let us bring in Rabbi Ancel. And you are on, sir.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's been a nice break, long holidays, but we're back.
We are. Yes, we are. Okay. So you wanted to talk about something tonight. You had a subject you wanted to speak
I
to.
wanted to talk about, because the word shalom in Hebrew, we always talk about shalom being peace, but shalom has many, many different meanings. So I figured we're going to talk about shalom the way it is now, how shalom or peace will be in the Messianic era, and what is shalom all about when there are wars? Because in Judaism there are different types of war, and how does Judaism handle it? Because there are wars of attrition, and there are wars for defending your own country. And rabbis have fought all the time about, is it allowed, it's not allowed, does shalom override war? So I thought, let's discuss it. A lot of people only know that shalom means peace, but the Hebrew word for peace is shalom. It denotes a sense of completion, which means perfection, shlemut, wholeness. In fact, the Bible in shalom means well-being or prosperity, not just peace. Therefore, in Judaism, peace not only is the opposite of war, but also an ideal situation. In this sense, peace, perfection, is something that will be not totally achieved until the Messianic era. When the Messiah comes, it says, nation shall not lift up a sword against another nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. But this will be part of a general societal harmony and perfection. The fact that the true peace is just a dream now, however, it does not mean that it's not in Jewish value in the present. In the Talmud, peace is one of the most esteemed values. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, three things preserve the world. One is truth, second is justice, and third is peace. Peace, however, seems to take precedence over the truth. which is hard sometimes to understand, as the Talmud permits deviation from truth in order to establish peace. In addition, there is a whole new category of rabbinic ordinances established, which is called Mipnei Darkei Shalom, which is in the interest of peace. And there's also a concept of Shalom Bait, which means peace in the home, which refers to the interest of family living together in perfect harmony or just in harmony. So there's even a sense that peace is more important than loyalty to God. Kind of hard to fathom that. There is even a sense that peace is more important than loyalty to God. In response to that, Hosea said in the Midrash, it says, even if Israel is tied to idols, leave him as long as peace prevails with it. Elsewhere, the Talmud says, if in order to establish peace between husband and wife, the name of God, which was written in holiness, may be blotted out, how much more so to bring about peace for the world as a whole? Any comments till now or questions?
Not yet.
Perhaps nothing exhibits the importance of peace more than the fact that almost every major Jewish prayers, whether it's in the daytime or nighttime, the Amidah, the Kaddish, the priestly blessing, the grace after meals, concludes with an appeal for peace. And yet Judaism is hardly pacifistic. There are clearly times when Judaism permits and even requires war. Jews have on occasion embraced nonviolence, even martyrdom, as a response to conflict, but not out of sense that violence is categorically inappropriate, rather because those situations, nonviolence was the best tactical option. Nonetheless, the minimization of violence is certainly a Jewish value. How you avoid peace?
Yeah, that's interesting because if just thinking about it, that peace or shalom in one form or another is mentioned probably more times than God's name is actually mentioned.
Yep. And we greet each other a million times during the day, and all over the world. There's millions of Jews, and most of them, or whoever's a little bit pious, will say shalom instead of good morning.
Hannah has joined us, and Richard has joined us, and I was gonna mention I was gonna mention this to you if I can get my mouth to work right tonight. I was gonna mention this to you when we were off the air about all of the people from different countries that we've been having in the chat room on the shows. I mean, we've had Brazil, we've had Jakarta, we've had various places around Europe, Italy, Germany, France, some places like that. But we're getting out there, and if you're in the chat room and you haven't been here before, please put the country that you're listening in up there in the chat room. Anyway, please go on.
Okay, so how in Judaism do we avoid conflict and violence? Indeed, when war is declared, the Torah requires that peace be offered prior to commencing an attack. Because it says, when you come near to a city to fight against it, then proclaim shalom to it before you start the war.
Well, actually, the Torah actually says you have to do it twice, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's almost like the Geneva Convention. You have to do it 3 times.
Yeah.
When you come near to a city to fight against it, then proclaim peace to it. Admittedly, in this context, shalom means something more like submission than peace. Nonetheless, biblical morality opposes a violent solution when a non-violent solution is possible. And I see this happening more and more and more in Israel because I see Israel as not having the same strength as when Golda Meir was and the one-eyed general.
Moshe Dayan.
I see every day a Jews getting killed,
Yeah.
and they're smart. They're doing it one by one, and they better wake up because one day is. I pray to Hashem that doesn't happen, but this is what they do.
Yeah.
Okay, so in addition, the rabbis of the Talmud established parameters for discretionary wars of aggression that makes them virtually impossible to declare today. For one, the Sanhedrin, traditionally Jewish high court, must be consulted. Today, there is no Sanhedrin, though some thinkers would extend this ruling to an equivalent body of representation, such as the Israeli Knesset, which is the parliament. In addition, the Urim Vitumin, the priestly breastplates or oracle, must be consulted to determine the probability of victory. The Urim Vitumin, however, no longer exists. So what do we do?
Yeah.
Finally, permitted wars do not trump obligations to fulfill the commandments, and thus one is not allowed to begin a non-commanded war, even any war that is not either defensive or against seven nations of biblical Israel or the biblical nation of Amalek, unless it is probable that commandments will not be needed to be transgressed. This is hardly feasible. Can you imagine a war that takes a break every Saturday?
Yeah.
You can't have war on Sabbath. Some people,
Well,
and this is,
according to the Talmud, yes, you can
of course, you can,
in
but
certain circumstances.
yeah, but not. So we're going to get there. Some people, which brings us to the point, because some people, which is basically the Orthodox, some people don't have to fight. The laws of war listed in Deuteronomy includes a list of those exempt from battle. The Talmud extends all the exemption and knows that they only apply to discretionary wars. In commanded wars, all go forth, even the bridegroom from his chamber, and the bride from her canopy.
Yeah, that's the issue that I had with a lot of the Haredim, is
Mm-hmm.
that they don't go into the army. I'm sorry, you have an obligation to go into the military, and when the country is under attack, you have an obligation. I mean, even during the Bar Kokhba Revolution and the Maccabean Revolution,
Yep.
the yeshivas emptied out.
Yep.
They all went out. So
This is
this whole idea that no, we need to stay and we need to pray. There's plenty of young men under 20 years of age that can continue studying Torah and stuff while you get your tuchus up and get out into the field.
well. I was in the Yom Kippur War, and we lost about 2,300 young boys. But if you don't want to go, if you don't believe in it, like the Chabad and Mea Shearim and some of the ultra Orthodox, then why are you in Israel? You're
Exactly.
accepting the pension money. If you have a dozen children, which is not unusual, the government helps you with money, but yet you don't want to return what the government does to you, the land of Israel does for you. Good, keeps you alive, children, school, universities, food, everything. But you're against defending your own country. That to me is cowardice.
Yeah.
Anyways, broadly
Well, I mean,
speaking,
that's even in Deuteronomy, it lays out who is exempt, and nowhere in is there an exemption for the student.
no, it doesn't exempt people who study Torah.
Exactly.
it does not. But unfortunately, the rabbinical, this is what bothers me the most because they make up their own rules. And it's the same thing, like I said, the most frustrating thing for me when I was in Florida and I ran the Chevra Kadisha. I asked Chabad, I asked the Breslev, and I asked the Sotmas, and I asked most of the synagogues, why can't we have a standard Tahara? No, but we do it this way. And Chabad says, no, we do it this way. And the Breslev said, oh no, you're both wrong. We do it this way. The Satmar said, forget it, we'll do it our way.
Yeah.
And this has been a problem with the rabbinical because everybody wants to be smarter than that, but they forget to look at the Mishnah, to look at the Talmud, to look at Torah, to look at the Gemara, what it really tells you, and then come together and come to an understanding. And this is the problem being in Israel. They got 40 million parties as compared to 2 or 3 parties in the United States, and they don't get along. Who needs Palestinians? And who needs enemies like the Palestinians or the Muslims? We are our own worst enemy because we can't get along with each other. Why? We'll find out when Mashiach comes because there is no reason to get along. But
there's no reason not to get along.
Yeah, not to get along, yeah. And unfortunately, most of Israel is secular. I had an argument. I had to block somebody on Facebook because he just kept on arguing. He said, but I know Torah better than you. I said, all right. So go ahead and teach Torah because you are not really basically a Jew because you are a Messianic Jew. And I'm not going to argue with the point. You have your ideas. I have my ideas. And, we can agree to disagree and we parted like friends, but it was a big fight. Anyways, broadly speaking, exemptions were granted to those who were during a life cycle event, those who built a new house, but has not dedicated it, or planted a vineyard, but has never harvested it, or spoken for a woman in marriage, but has not married her. That's what the Deuteronomy says. In addition, the Torah provides exemptions for the fearful and the tender-hearted. Most scholars and rabbinic authorities believe that these psychological exemptions were meant to exclude soldiers whose attitude would hurt the morale of the army.
That's right.
Well, I think it's being a little bit harsh because there are people who just are not meant to be soldiers or not meant to go to war.
Well, and again, you're in the military and you've read about different campaigns and stuff like that, and that it can only take one person to infect an entire platoon.
So one bad apple in a.
Well, I'm not even saying a bad apple. I'm saying somebody who's extremely fearful that they're going to die, and that infects everybody.
That is war. I was in four of them. I knew maybe there was a chance for me not to come back. And this is why I remember I said to you that I punished my mother the worst because sometimes you were not allowed to call.
Right.
So something that would show up at home and knock on the door and she would see me because we had a small door on the window, the entrance door. And she would see my face and she would pass out because she had to see me for 2-3 months. She didn't know I was alive or I was gone. So these things, if you're afraid of war, you're basically afraid of living because, it's not being cowardly, it's just fearful, and it's when somebody, if you're in a company of 6 soldiers and one panics and runs, they all will run.
That's right, exactly.
It's just like a magnet, it just catches on. Unfortunately, it's true. Okay.
Yeah, which and that excusing from the in the Torah makes perfect sense, because when you're in a war for your life, as Israel tends to be, that you don't want to, you would rather not have that among the ranks.
Of course not. It's dangerous enough. You are in a war. You don't need anybody who's going to chicken out and run on you because, like I said, they will follow that person because, what's wrong? If he's running, let's run too, It's just normal human reaction.
Well,
But
yeah,
when
that's the whole thing. You don't know
yeah,
why he's running. You figure there
no,
must be a good reason why he's running, and
correct.
then you take to heel at that point too.
Yep.
And I mean, again, one of my favorite books is called The Hinge Factor: How Chance and Stupidity Changed World History. And there's a lot of instances in that book. I love that book. A lot of instances of that book where just something like that happened and it turned the whole tide of the war. Turned,
Yeah.
snatched victory from the jaws of defeat.
But unfortunately, sometimes you have somebody who is scared, and they point fingers at him and say, "Oh, you coward." He's not really coward because, you know, if you're a coward and you run, you know what's going to happen if you're in the army or in
Yeah.
the service. But there is a little. If I would lie to say that I wasn't scared, but it's a normal
Oh,
reaction.
what is
But
I think I can't remember what general it says. It says that any man who says that he's not afraid in battle is either a fool or a
I think it
liar.
was MacArthur. This is how it happened to me when I was when I was, let's say, not in a mission. I was relaxing. Your mind is set. You watch TV. You talk to people. Once I got into the cockpit, it was a different. It just automatically it became another world. This was
Yeah.
your cockpit. This was your home, and everything else just disappeared. You automatically knew which buttons to start the engines and what to do and check out everything, and you were in a different world. Once you were in that canopy came down, you were by yourself. There was nobody with you,
Yeah.
and you did what you learned in war, especially a pilot. You do not have time to think. You
That's it.
react
Yeah.
to a situation or you're dead.
Well, I mean, that's exactly why basic is so hard. It's to train you to react immediately to an order.
Yeah,
Because by doing so, you will save your life and you will save other people's lives too. Claudia has joined us from Brazil.
yeah. So it's war is like I always said. Nobody wins in war. War is war, and you do, especially a war that you are defending your own country. It is your country. War of an aggression or taking over land, it is totally, and we'll read it. I'm going to read it to you later. It's totally you react totally. You do things totally.
Yeah.
Sometimes I ask myself, and I talk to Aryel, and I said, what were we doing in Iraq and in Pakistan? Because they're poor countries. There are reasons, and we're not going to get into it. But that was not a war of to defend your country. Those people were defending their country, but we were not. We basically we had no business. We had the same thing, my opinion, and please forgive me if you disagree with me, but we had no business being in Vietnam. No business at all. Plus, the United States was not used to jungle warfare. You have no idea what went on there.
Oh, wait a
I
minute.
was
Wait a
not
minute. Wait
there,
a
but
minute.
I
Wait.
was
Wait.
talking to
Wait. Wait.
people.
Wait. 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 You said the United States was not used to jungle warfare. What?
Not the way the Vietnamese handled
Okay.
it.
Okay. I was gonna say, if you were talking about, the Iraq War, I mean that. What jungle? We haven't
Yeah,
been fighting in a jungle war since Vietnam.
of course. But in Pakistan, you know, they had these what they call them the Gurkhas.
Oh
Even
yeah, the
from
Gurkhas. Yeah,
yeah, even in India,
world famous.
these yeah, it was a total different warfare. Nicaragua was the warfare for the drugs.
Right.
We used to throw napalm just to burn the poppy seeds and the marijuana fields. And I'm telling you, there were marijuana fields as far as the eye could see. And that's the only thing that could destroy it quickly. It was napalm. But
Right,
napalm is
that was the Sandinistans and
with the
the
the war of the Sandinistas.
yeah.
I told you the story with the guy with the ears.
I'm sorry, which one? Huh?
When we did the some of the ops in Nicaragua, because it was not the Congress didn't allow it, nobody
Right.
allowed it. It was just the president. It was not known. We used to land on fields just lit by oil cans. So one night we went into a barn. That was supposed to be the officers' mess, and there were six of us. And maybe 70, 80 feet away at the bar, there was a guy sitting, and it looked kind of odd. And the closer we got, we looked at each other and said, "What in God's name is this?" We went over and said he had two strings of human ears hanging down his pants from his belt. So he said, "Sir, what gives?" He says, "Every time I kill a Sandinista, I cut his left ear off. This is how I get paid." He was sitting there waiting till morning to get paid. So, but that's not normal war, okay? So, but these
No, no.
these things these things will happen, you know. Okay, so let's continue. If people have some questions, they can ask anytime, and they can also call me at home, and they can call you. I mean, I'm always available for any questions, even if it has to do with Jewish law, Judaism, history, anything. I'm available. Anyways, so let's go in. What will it really mean? The time of the Mashiach. Can you move up the arrival of the Messiah? Hello?
Yes,
Can you move it?
I already did.
No. It's the one that says the arrival of Mashiach. Okay.
Yeah.
The rabbis, they speculated, and see, always the rabbis, it's not the Torah or anybody else, but the rabbis speculated on the conditions under which Mashiach will likely to appear. They said that he will not arrive on the Sabbath, which makes sense, but they had to say it, since that would require people to violate the Sabbath and welcome him, which is in the Babylonian Talmud. The prophet Elijah, who's supposed to usher the Messianic age, will arrive no later in the week than Thursday, leaving room for
Lost my place here. There we go. Oop. For Messiah to arrive on Friday.
by Friday. Elijah will announce the arrival of the Messiah from Mount Carmel in the land of Israel. That's also in the Jerusalem. That's in the Jerusalem Talmud. Many rabbis believe that the Messiah would arrive suddenly on the eve of Passover because we have the cup for Mashiach, the first redemption, which serves as a model of the final redemption. So, corruption and degradation will precede redemption. What does it really mean? Okay, one statement from the time of the rabbis describes the era leading up to the Mashiach in the darkest terms of societal corruption. In the footsteps of Mashiach, the arrogance, which means chutzpah, will increase, prices will rise, grapes will be abundant, but wine will be costly. The government will turn into heresy, and there will be no reproach. The meeting place of scholars will become a bordello. The Galilee will be destroyed. The highland will lie desolate. The border people will wander from city to city, and none will show them compassion. The wisdom of authors will stink, excuse the language, since fearing people will detest the truth, will be missing. Young men will humiliate the elderly will stand while the young sit. Sons will revile the fathers, daughters will strike against mothers, brides will strike against the mother in law. and a man's enemies will take over his house.
Yeah. What
The
does that
face
sound
of the
like?
huh?
What does that sound like?
You tell me.
Sounds a lot like what's going on today, doesn't it?
Exactly. This is what it's going to say. The face of the generation is like the face of a dog. Sons have no shame in front of their fathers, and for whom can one depend? Only upon our Father in heaven. This was it. This is exactly what's going on, and it sickens me.
Yeah.
The era of Moshiach will be characterized by God's war against Gog and Magog and other catastrophic events. Another statement which may date from time of the Hadrianic persecutions, this was around the 132 to 35 CE, offers the dark assessment that the Mashiach will arrive in a period when Jews collaborate with their enemies, and which is happening now
Mm-hmm.
because some of the
Yep.
Orthodox Jews are on the side of the Palestinians. Torah learning disappears, poverty increases, and religious despair deepens. The son of David will not arrive until informers are everywhere. Another view is until there are few students left. Another view is until the last coin is gone from the pocket. And another view is until people despair of redemption, as if there is no support or help for Israel. That's in Sanhedrin. Some sages predicted that the Messiah will not arrive until Israel observes the commandments more fully. Rabbi Judah said in the name of the Rav, if all of Israel, this is the one you and I were talking about, if
Yeah.
all of Israel had observed a very first Sabbath, no nation or tongue would have ever ruled over her. Rabbi Yohanan said, follow Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, were Israel to observe two Sabbath punctuously,
Continuously.
yeah, punctuously, they would be redeemed immediately. Some rabbis, like Rabbi Feinstein thought, he says, well, let's make it just one Sabbath because all of Israel to follow one Sabbath completely, I can guarantee you won't bet my last penny because it will never happen
Oh,
unless,
we know
unless
that goes all the way back to the manna in the wilderness.
yep.
On the seventh day, they would go out and they would go to collect, and there was nothing there. And
Yep.
or later on, when they got the commandments, and the guy went out and collected wood, you know.
But this is one of the big fights of why it was their God was he crucified, and one of the things that he told his people that they're allowed to work on Shabbos,
Yeah.
and that was one of the big mistakes he had made. Okay, so some rabbis believe that the arrival of the Mashiach had no relation either to political or societal events or individual actions. They believe that there were a finite number of souls destined to enter the world and reside within human bodies. When the supply of fresh souls were exhausted, Moshiach would come. And that is written in a few places. Okay,
Yeah, Yavamot,
yeah,
Awadazara, Nida.
yeah. Okay, so converting to converting to Judaism in the Messianic age.
Ah,
A
this will be
central
interesting.
question, a central question that preoccupied the rabbis was how the Messianic age would differ from the present age. One concern was one concern was that many Gentiles would convert to Judaism at the last moment, just in order to participate in the new age, which
Kind of
is the
like
wrong reason.
the Egyptians or the mixed multitude that came out with Israel under Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yeah, so that is the wrong reason. That's why some sages concluded, therefore, that converts are not received in the days of the Mashiach, which I believe that they're wrong. just as they were not welcome in the days of David and King Solomon.
Right, because it was going very well for Israel, and that's not the time that you take converts.
Correct. So
And
therefore,
I have to agree with the sages. I mean, I think that during the reign of Mashiach that there won't be any conversions allowed.
you won't need to. Okay. So now here we go. A dispute arose among the rabbinic sages about the desirability of encouraging Gentiles to convert to Judaism. While most welcome converts, others raised doubt about their sincerity. That's why when I told you sometimes, you one of the rules, to test people is to, you know, I forgot the word. You refuse them two times.
Yeah.
You rebuke them two times to see if they were serious. Rabbi Aryel, who mistrusted the sincerity of converts, stated that converts are more difficult for Israel than a sword. Others suspected that converts might not remain loyal during the Messianic era. They decided that converts could be accepted, but with difficulty. See, this is now that's what I agree with, because here they changed their mind, but with difficulty because they were likely to revert to their former ways in the heat of messianic upheavals. Here's a point. Uh, you're going to do a conversion for a family that has two children. One is 3 and one is 5. So you give them the conversion. But it also says that these two children, when they reach the age of 18, they have to be told that they were converted to Judaism, and they have a right to change their mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into specific features of the Messianic age. Foreign nations would not be obliterated in the Messianic era. Nations such as Rome would come to the Messiah to pay tribute to him, but their appeals for favor would be rejected. Therefore, some rabbis faced the Messianic age with anticipations, others with dread. One viewpoint suggested that knowledge of Torah would continue to decline in the Messianic age. A bad announcement was conveyed to Israel at that moment. In the future, Torah will be forgotten. Others forecasted that in the future era, the a little bit higher. Where am I now? I lost one.
Oh, you're right here.
Okay, others forecasted that in the future era, the synagogues, the academies of Babylonia will be transported to the land of Israel.
Okay, so that's there are no. I mean, obviously, this was post the Babylonian exile, but Babylon doesn't actually exist anymore.
Correct.
So I mean, and in that area where Babylon was, there's pretty much no Jews there anyway.
How right you are. Okay, so still others, which means rabbis, still others held that humans would take on a new appearance. Some thought that man would achieve a height of 160 feet. Well, they thought. While another suggested he might double that. There is no suggestion that the Mashiach himself is a wonder worker, but many sages believe that the Messianic age would be a time of wonders. Women would give birth painlessly, hens would lay eggs continuously, and food would appear in abundance. The land of milk and honey.
Yeah.
Others, such as Rabbi Eliezer, believed that the next era would be unprecedented and qualitatively different. This debate represented the two poles of the Jewish belief about the Messianic era. One view sees it in terms of normal human existence under conditions of Jewish political independence. The others are something holy that defies prediction. During the Messianic era, the Mashiach will reign victorious and rebuild the temple. He will restore the priesthood to the temple, and the traditional sacrifice will be reinstated. The return of the golden age of the Jewish people will be complete. Many popular Jewish prayers expresses this messianic longing for the rebuilding of the temple and above all for the return to Zion. Perhaps even more, the coming of the Mashiach. Traditional Judaism has saw this dream of the return of Zion. And this has been our dream in our lifetime to see the Mashiach come. Do we deserve it? Deservedly, I can say no.
Yeah.
Take a look what's going on in the world. I mean,
Well, I have
you
to
know,
I have to think that during the Messianic age, the whole Siddur would basically change.
of course, because then you don't have to make wishes. Everything will be there. You don't have to wish for anything.
Yeah, and we won't have to say we're waiting for Mashiach. Well, he's already here.
Yeah, you can go and tell him, hey, sir, this was a long wait.
Yeah, we won't have to pray for the temple to be rebuilt. We won't have to pray for Jerusalem to be restored, the courts to be restored. I mean, a lot of the prayers will disappear. The Siddur will get a lot shorter.
Yes. We can only dream right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about shalom. So now we can look at the Jewish perspective on a war, because there's different types of war in Judaism. Because it says, "You shall do right."
Well, I'll tell you what. We're almost at our halfway point. Why don't we go ahead and we'll take our break here,
Okay.
and then when we come back, we'll go ahead and we'll get into the aspects of war.
Okay.
So let me turn you down here for a moment.
Okay.
And it's just such a feeling of power to be able to do that. Okay, so we're going to take our 6-minute break, and we will return. We'll go into the Jewish aspects of war. And so please, everyone, stay tuned.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
Okay.
There, now we got the microphone on. That actually
Okay, so
works
now
a lot
we're
better.
gonna, yeah, so now we're gonna discuss the ethics of war in Judaism. There were there are contemporary Jewish discussions of ethics of initiating war, just ad bellum, are often legal in character, building on the categories of war established by the Mishnah in reference to Deuteronomy 20. The Mishnah distinguishes between obligatory wars on one hand and optional wars on the other hand. But the Mishnah and the discussions of Mishnah in the Talmud offer little clarity as to what would make contemporary war obligatory, optional, or alternatively prohibited by Jewish law. Okay, up.
There's a delay.
Okay. Okay, so contemporary scholars engaged in the Mishnah's legal framework have generally ruled that obligatory wars are, above all, wars of self-defense. Others, though, have pointed to the Torah's demands to launch aggressive wars as well. Some scholars have ruled that the category of optional wars has no legal validity in the present day. Others, though, have stressed that this category can justify wars for the sake of power, territory, and glory. Some scholars looking to the legal text that place limits on warfare have developed the legal category of prohibited wars. Others, often seeking greater license for war, have noted that the Mishnah does not offer a category of prohibited wars at all. Anyone seeking to follow Jewish law in deciding the justice of given wars is unlikely to find clear direction. We can go to the Gemara.
Yeah.
A widely echoed scholarly sentiment is that the Jewish legal traditions offers little direct evidence regarding the grounds on which one is morally to evaluate a war. The classical legal tradition, in fact, has relatively little to say about warfare, especially because of the Jewish people's limited experience with initiating war during most of Judaism's formative period. Contemporary legalists have, of course, attempted to build new edifices of law, often hanging by a thread from the brief discussions of the Mishnah, Talmud, and the medieval codification of Maimonides, but they have achieved little unanimity. There may be seen to be a broad agreement on certain principles, such as support for wars of self-defense, but there are significant disagreements on what constitutes legitimate self-defense. Not only are judgments concerning waging optional wars left to the discretion by judging the fundamental question of when a war is obligatory, optional, or prohibited appears to be a matter of discretion. The discretion that the legal system may grant, however, should not provide a license to wage whatever wars one desires to wage. Discretion must be guided by virtues. Human beings are obligated to take guidance not only from properly crafted rules, but also from carefully considered virtues.
Now, we were actually talking about this earlier, that Rabbi Lior and I can't remember who the other rabbi was, but they wrote a book which was actually banned in Israel. I've been trying to get a copy of it for a long time. I can't get anybody to send me one. Which was the King's Wars, I think it was called. And it was basically, it was to lay out the ethical and moral requirements for waging war, and what soldiers were permitted to do and stuff like that. and they took it directly out of the Torah and the Talmud and the Mishnah, and it was banned. It was actually banned because I have no idea why, and they actually charged him in court over this.
Okay, so a little bit up. So I am at the end of Nachmanides. Okay, Nachmanides famously pointed out that the Torah does not offer rules for many cases. When dealing with an area without clear legal norms, one must do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, of God, conforming one's behavior to the general requirements of moral virtue. The vague commandment to act virtuously, to do what is right and good, of course, does not clear up the ambiguities posed by the Jewish legal traditions on questions of initiating warfare. Nearly anything can be understood to be right and good, and the specific virtues themselves can be interpreted in many different directions. For some interpreters, Moses, who was humbler than any other man, has been led by his humility to refrain from aggression. Other interpreters, however, have seen Moses' humility at work in his submission to God's command to wage a genocidal war against Midian. Where am I? Okay. The proper contours of humility or of any other virtue must be worked out through a good deal of critical reasoning. This process requires, in part, what is best known in Hebrew as Heshbon HaNefesh. That means to Heshbon is to really Heshbon, to take account of your soul. That is what it is. Hanefesh is the soul. Heshbon is to take account. A phrase that may be translated as, or self-reckoning, or as moral accounting. The 11th century Jewish philosopher Bakuda was the first to stress Heshbon HaNefesh has an obligatory activity for all human beings. This self-reckoning, as Bahia's translator Menachem Mansour renders the phrase, is a matter of considering the ideals of divine goodness, the reality of his own moral deficiencies, and the need for one's own moral improvement. Insofar as he or she is able, a person is obligated to constantly consider the virtues that are the essence of divine goodness, and to consider how to better develop and practice those virtues. Self-reckoning, Bahia wrote, is the binding upon each person according to his intellectual ability and power of discrimination. But at all times, with every blink of his eyes and with every breath he takes, is this possible? Bahia saw the obligation as a rational duty which may also be derived from a series of biblical verses, the first of which is the commandment in Deuteronomy concerning the duty of a king to study Torah. When a king is seated on his royal throne, he shall have a copy of this teaching written for him on a scroll by the Levitical priest. Let it remain with him, and let him read it in it all his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God, to observe faithfully every word of his teaching as well as his laws. Thus, he will not act haughtily towards his fellows or deviate from the instructions to the right or to the left, to the end that he has his descendants may reign long amid Israel. A king would seem to be need of moral accounting. Biblical kings were granted substantial discretionary power, as the biblical book of Samuel indicates, especially so that they could effectively wage war. But their hardness and their power to wage war had to be checked by moral accounting. In the model offered by the Torah, which Bahia refers, moral accounting was seen to be carried out through meditation on the scriptures, and we might call a process a scriptural reasoning. A ruler should not reason about his policies through careful consideration of the key virtues taught by the Torah, though there are other practices that may encourage moral accounting. These verses ordain a practice of reading which is designed to direct the king towards humility and reverence for God. In Bahia's words, so that the fear, respect, and the shame before God may never leave him. So now there's another one, Menachem Mendel Leffen's model. Bahia's language of moral accounting was taken up in the early 19th century by Menachem Mendel Leffen, the leading figure of the Polish Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment movement. Leffen was a scholar deeply concerned about moral education within the Jewish community. He was also involved with the education of non-Jewish nobility, serving as a tutor to Adam and Jerzy Czartoryski, who was a young Polish prince and the future foreign minister of the Russian Empire. Leffen was not a scholar of international relations or war ethics any more than Bakudas was, but he too offered a vision of the process of moral formation that might be helpful for policymakers confronted with the opportunities to wage war. In 1808, Leffen published a book titled Moral Accounting, which offered a detailed program for moral improvement. Though he drew on Bahia's vision of moral accounting in many respects, he was convinced that the contemplative exercises were insufficient for moral improvement. He instead borrowed a practical program that had been devised by the young Benjamin Franklin, a procedure of working on virtues one at a time and noting progressions and lapses in writing on an accounting ledger. Each week would be devoted to focusing on one of the 13 virtues, and the 13-week cycle would be repeated 4 times over the course of a year. Franklin saw this program as the foundation for an international political party, a united party of virtue. Admission which would depend upon engaging in this sort of rigorous self-examination. In developing a Jewish version of this system for moral improvement, Leffen's book discussed a similar set of 13 virtues, explaining that each virtue, with a reference to its rationality and passages from the Hebrew Bible and rabbinical literature. Following Franklin, Leffen also recommended selecting a short, memorable phrase for each virtue, which should be recited each morning. A biblical verse, a passage from elsewhere in the Jewish literature, or a phrase made up by the practitioner. The ideal practice was not to always have Torah scroll at one side, like the king in Deuteronomy, but rather to be judicious in selecting phrases that could aid human reason in remembering particular virtues. One should concentrate on the phrase, if it was engraved on his heart, as if he saw it actually written in front of him. And if someone was whispering into his ear, and as if he was repeating it after him, one should take stock of one's own character in light of such messages. Regularly record one's findings on paper and develop and implement a plan for improvement based on those findings. Crucially, Lefton improved on Franklin's model by urging that such an assessment be done along with a partner. It is preferable, he wrote, that one undertakes this course along with a friend, for then they can continually motivate each other and each can benefit from other experiences. This is why it's better to learn Torah between two people or more. And this gives you the reason why. Drawing on the traditional Jewish practice of studying with a partner, he points out that self-improvement requires the voice of another person who will offer honest criticism and advice. Perhaps one's wife. He advised his male readers who can test one of the most severely and most constantly. Or working with a master teacher, a rabbi, might be ideal. However, as it is difficult to find a rabbi who is sound in all his ways, it is better to seek one teacher for some character traits and another teacher for other character traits, so that one may bind oneself to the Lord's Torah, keep oneself from error, and straighten all of one's ways. Given the inevitable flaws in the advice one may receive from others, opening oneself to a number of trustworthy friends and teachers and to multiple lines of constructive criticism is ideal. Certainly, at the very best, it is inadequate to engage in self-assessment with no outside feedback. One should not just assess oneself, but one should allow oneself to be assessed by another. Lefton supports this insight with words attributed to King Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes. Two are better off than one. King David for they should fall, and one can raise the other. Lefton saw that for that matter, the entire process of moral accounting as grounded in Scripture. He placed the words of Psalm attributed to King David at the front of his book. I have taken an accounting of my ways, and I have turned my steps to your testimonies. These are all part of the Psalms of King David. So King David functions as Lefton's exemplar, who worked on his moral virtues, his ways, so that they might more closely resemble perfect divine virtues, here described as God's testimonies. Such work is, as the Hebrew verse indicates, a process of turning, teshuvah, repentance, which begins with finding faults within oneself. The humility to acknowledge one's own shortcomings is clearly retired for the work of moral accounting. Humility, anava, is here a foundational virtue, joining the 12 other key virtues on Lefton's list. Equanimity, patience, order, diligence, cleanliness, frugality, industriousness, silence, gentleness, honesty, and chastity.
You forgot justice.
Yes, I did. Oh, okay, sorry.
Mm-hmm. And just in case somebody was keeping count.
Okay. Though Lefton's favorite virtues resemble Franklin's to a significant degree, Nancy Sincock has pointed out that Leffen was not aiming at developing a political party as much as was on the defensive against a particular threat within the Jewish community. He was, above all, seeking to urge young Jewish men to resist the temptation of enthusiastic Hasidic pietism. Leffen was certainly not focused on the questions of military policy that are the subject of this paper, but his program was for avoiding impulse, enthusiastic judgments and for making thoughtful, reasoned judgments instead. It is applicable to people in all walks of life and certainly to the arena of war policy. Decisions to wage war may often be swayed by precisely the sorts of enthusiasm, pride, and confusion that Leffen warned against in his book called Moral Accounting. As David Fisher argued in this book, Morality and War, human history has regularly shown how the heat, fury, and the fog of war prevent dispassionate ethical reasoning about the justice of waging wars. In order to engage in proper reasoning, Fisher has emphasized all those involved in decision making about war need to have been trained and well practiced in the virtues. The model of moral accounting advocated by Leffen is one of the models that might help provide that sort of training. Self-examination is an essential activity for everybody bearing the weighty responsibility that come with warfare. For citizens who contribute to the decision regarding war and peace, for soldiers who make key decisions in the heat of battle, and especially for the civilian and military policymakers who bear the ultimate responsibility for decisions about whether to initiate wars. Politicians, perhaps above all, are often untrained in the virtues and may be especially in need of the sorts of reflective exercises that Franklin and Leffen urged. Like the biblical kings who were easily led astray by the temptations of war, contemporary policymakers need all the scrutiny that they can get. As part of their work, policymakers grounded in the Jewish tradition might benefit from Leffen's model of moral accounting, regularly assessing their equanimity, their justice, their humility, their honesty, their diligence among the other virtues. Okay, the next section. Okay, equanimity, a state of calmness and peace in the soul, is the first of the virtues that Leffen discussed in the moral accounting. And it is a virtue which is referenced throughout the entire work. Leffen sees equanimity as a state of inner composure which allows reason to rule the human being. As long as a person's mind is settled, one rational soul stands quietly on guard and flows into one's brain, as if it were a torch atop of the body. One should remember, Leffen suggests the biblical teaches that the human soul is the lamp of the Lord, searching every innermost part, that is, that the rational part of the soul may infuse its light into the rest of the human being, if one has properly cultivated the virtue of equanimity. If one has not done so, however, one may be enveloped by a fearful darkness, or by desires which incite a person to be like a bird rushing into a trap. The fear of death, Leffen points out, is an especially common fear which leads human beings astray. But even a person who does not possess equanimity in the face of death may not possess equanimity in face of other destructive desires, As Leffen points out in the following example, a general has been conditioned to fulfill his role throughout his spirit of pride and his envy of his colleagues, or through his love of his people. He stands at the head of his troops and sees devastating fire and death all around him. Yet he is able to remain and plan the battle strategies with a clear mind, as if he were sitting serenely in his room. Yet even someone as brave as him, whose courage is steadfast in the face of physical fear and danger, can become totally unnerved and unsettled by any fear having to do with love, pride, envy, or loss of prestige. In, in this example, the general developed his equanimity in the face of death by encouraging a series of other desires, failing to consider how those desires themselves might destroy his equanimity, especially in the context of war, where not only fear of death, but many other passions may run wild. Like most public figures, Leffen's general is a particularly motivated by the desire for honor he seeks, by the envy by his colleagues, and to be praised by the public. Contemporary war policymakers would do well to examine the same tendencies in their own souls. What do they hope will arouse the envy for their colleagues and praise of the public? And, and are they hopes warranted? To what degree do they imagine war as a source of potential glory or a source of meaning and fulfillment? And to what degree do they acknowledge the realities of what war may entail? To what degree do they have the foresight advised by Shmuel Hanagi, a rare Talmudic scholar who was also a military commander in the 11th century in Spain, and who warned his audience that first, war resembles a beautiful mouth we all want to flirt with and believe. The illusion that war is beautiful has often been linked with the idea that it can provide opportunities for a personal glory, a notion which the Hebrew Bible, like many texts, may encourage. The Bible offers violent heroes like Phinehas, who hurls the first spear into the war against Midian, impaling his fellow Israelite. Zimri and Zimri's Mediante consort, Cosby. Phinehas is honored with a divine pact of friendship, Beit Shalom, bestowing the office of priesthood upon his descendants because he took impassioned action for his God. These verses heralding Phinehas' enthusiastic zealotry are, needless to say, not the sort of verses that Menachem Mendel Leffen recommended to his readers. And they are dangerous verses to recommend to those entrusted with decisions about war. Other Jewish commentators have, in fact, praised Phinehas as an exemplar of equanimity, whose acts with decisiveness and justice despite the dangers surrounding him. But Leffen's model of equanimity turns more to the cautious of the book of Proverbs than the glorification of zealotry in the book of Numbers. And that tendency towards caution is appropriate when it comes to decisions to initiate war. Even when a swift and decisive military operation may be necessary, a policymaker must be suspicious of the ways in which the promise of glory may motivate an unjust war. Many other sorts of promises can, of course, also distort equanimity. Chris Hedges has documented at length, for instance, the ways in which war can seduce supporters by promising not only glory, but also personal meaning and fulfillment. For those thinking within the context of the Jewish tradition, The promise that one's action may help to contribute to a grand messianic redemption can be especially enticing and attractive to one's own nation, as Leffen points out in his illustration of the general, can also distort equanimity. The general may be motivated by the calm battle, by his love of his people. But the same love can disturb his clarity of vision in other respects. So, too, our sense of justice can work in cooperation with our equanimity, but it can also undermine it. In particular, our vision may be distorted by our inclination to see wars as just when they are carried out by our own nations, even when they produce much injustice. Those deciding one questions of war and peace should undoubtedly regularly be assessing how they have internalized their concept of justice. So, what is justice?
What is justice?
Yeah, as a tradition of just war theory suggests that war can only be just if, among other things, it is waged for just causes, and if those causes can be pursued without producing an excess of new injustices. Justice, justice you shall pursue. That's in Deuteronomy. As the classic rabbinic interpretation has it, the end one seeks must be just, and the mean to the end must be just as well.
In other
While
words,
classic,
the ends does not justify the means.
yep. While classical Jewish sources imagine that just causes can include specific, aggressive divine commands that are recorded in the Torah, or a king's desire for power, territory, and glory, contemporary Jewish ethicists have tended to depict defense against aggression as the only legitimate cause for war. But this tendency, I think, deserves scrutiny. Defense against aggression is surely the most moral motivation for war. It is, accordingly to most, convincing. And so those who are inclined to support a war without sufficient cause on grounds of defense are nonetheless inclined to depict the war in question as a defensive war. The example is the American war policy is intrusive here, as Richard Rubinstein has argued. American military adventures of all sorts, including territorial power grabs, have routinely been justified by appeals to self-defense, to the need to rescue other oppressed peoples, and to the need to defeat an inherently aggressive enemy. War advocates generally believe that they are acting defensively and, therefore, armed with strong sense of justice. Given this tendency, a critical accounting of policymakers' sense of justice is especially important.
I'm going to take a little exception to what he has to say here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's pretty popular to bash the United States, America, and this American military ventures of all sorts, including territorial power grabs, have routinely been justified as appeals to self-defense and the rescue of oppressed people. Where have we ever, taken
Where
land?
does the United States have other territories, except territory of Puerto Rico? But they never grabbed territory for power grabs.
No, I mean, there's it's a specious argument. There's no real evidence that the United States has ever gone into a country and basically taken it over, taken the taken the land and oppressed the people.
But that's his opinion. It's not the general opinion. So that's why he's saying, as noted above, justice, which is tzedek, is one of the 13 virtues which Leffin singled out for particular attention in moral accounting. He defines justice simply as a matter of loving your fellow as yourself. That's in Leviticus. And using the classic Aramaic phrase, as not doing to your fellow that which is hateful to you. So while Leffin suggests to his readers that special consideration may be given to fellow monotheists, he extends the reach of love and justice probably to all human beings. At its foundation, in Leffin's view, justice mandates a loving regard for the dignity of all people, such that one should not do to others what would be hateful to oneself. For Leffin, meditating on this notion is key to the work of moral accounting, and it would seem to be a key piece of the accounting in which contemporary war policymakers might engage. For the policymaker, examining and developing one's love, justice, and equal regard for other human beings might help to guard against the instinct to demonize one's enemies. To recognize the lives war may save, and to recognize the lives that war inevitably destroys.
Okay, we're about at the end of our time here.
Okay.
And we're just going to head close this down for now. Okay.
Any questions from our gallery? No?
No, it doesn't seem to be. Okay, so tomorrow night is the Torah study in depth with myself, and Rabbi Ancel will be back with us for that. And we're coming to the end of Shemot fairly quickly now. So
yeah.
Okay, and then Friday evening at 8 p.m. is Kabbalat and Mariv Shabbat service at Parsha Lach Lecha, and Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. Eastern is the Shacharit and Musaf service. Until then, I'm going to turn you down for a moment here.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead and don't forget, on Monday night is Zeta Story Corner. And then right back here again for Tuesday for the Rabbis Discuss. Until then, everyone, Laila Tov.